What's up, guys? I'm DK, and you're watching Pro Wrestling What If, the series where I look at the different what if scenarios as terms of the world that we call professional wrestling. As we are just around the corner from WrestleMania 41, I wanted to bring up the breath of fresh air that was WrestleMania 40. A show where many moments were created, like Sami Zayn ending the 666-day Intercontinental Championship reign of Gunther, Damian Priest becoming the second person to cash in the Money in the Bank briefcase at a WrestleMania, a super kick fest between brothers that still feeds families today. Okay, maybe Jay versus Jimmy Uso was one of the downers of this show, but you know what wasn't? The American Nightmare Cody Rhodes finally being able to finish the story and end the 1,316-day reign of the Tribal Chief Roman Reigns by winning the undisputed WWE Championship. Not only did WrestleMania 40 have so many great moments, but it was a breath of fresh air because this marked the first WrestleMania in history to have no involvement from Vince McMahon in any way. Yes, even though Papa H was part of creative for WrestleMania 39, you can't tell me there wasn't a bit of Vince McMahon sprinkled into the event. Like the match of Brock Lesnar versus Omos and the fact that Edge went over on Finn Balor when it should have been the other way around. But what if I told you that WrestleMania 40 could have potentially been in a top 5 contender for worst WrestleManias of all time had certain circumstances occurred? With one of them being that Vince McMahon was still running the WWE and didn't sell to Endeavor in 2023, which also means that because Vince McMahon is still here, it's a 99.8% chance that CM Punk doesn't end up returning to WWE at Survivor Series 2023. So that's going to be the topic of today's video. It's what if Vince McMahon had booked WrestleMania 40? And if you end up enjoying this video, don't forget to hit that like button, share this to all your friends, subscribe, and press the notification bell for when future episodes get released, and leave a comment down below about today's topic or suggesting a future topic for an episode of Pro Wrestling What If. And for this video, I will be talking about 14 matches that I think would happen, which will be divided 7 each, since this event, of course, is 2 nights. So kicking off with night 1, the first match would be Becky Lynch versus Rhea Ripley for the Women's World Championship. Not only did this match happen in the real timeline, but it was the opening match of night 1 for the event. The seeds were clearly planted for this match throughout 2023, even while Vince McMahon was still running the ship, as they had sent Becky Lynch to NXT, so that way they literally separated the two apart until closer to 2024. The only difference with this match, unlike the one that happened, was that I believe that Vince McMahon would have had Becky Lynch walk out as the Women's World Champion instead of Rhea Ripley retaining. Match number 2 would be the ladder match for the undisputed tag team championships with A-Town Down Under, Awesome Truth, DIY, Judgment Day, The New Day, and the Street Profits. Yes, I said the Street Profits instead of the New Catch Republic, not only because the Philadelphia street fight with the Pride in the Final Testament doesn't happen here, but due to that, they probably would have had the Street Profits in the match instead of New Catch Republic. Now, I'm not sure whether Vince McMahon would have separated the titles in this match like it was booked in the real timeline, but if they were separated, then I think it would be the same winners of the match. He was always high on both The Miz and R-Truth, and with Austin Theory's big push during 2022, that's how I think A-Town Down Under would capture the other set of tag team championships. Match number 3, and the first new match of this video, being Sami Zayn versus Chad Gable for the Intercontinental Championship. Sami Zayn had faced Gunther for the Intercontinental Championship, but with Gunther having a different match in this timeline, that match doesn't occur here. A lot of us wish that Chad Gable had the match with Gunther at WrestleMania instead of Sami Zayn, but Gable would actually win that match against Gunther on Raw in this timeline and go into WrestleMania as the Intercontinental Champion. This would allow Chad Gable to have a spot on WrestleMania and have Sami Zayn still challenge for the title, which I do think that Sami Zayn would still walk out as the new champion. Then potentially either after that match or the Raw after WrestleMania, we would still have the Chad Gable heel turn that happened when they faced on the April 15th, 2024 episode of Raw. Match number 4 would still be Jay versus Jimmy Uso. The match that was set up once Jimmy turned his back on Jay during the main event of SummerSlam 2023, an event where Vince McMahon still owned the WWE. So I felt this match was going to happen regardless of who was in charge of the WWE, but unfortunately this is a match that we thought was going to be much better than it actually was. Part of me thinks that Jimmy Uso could have been booked to actually win here instead of Jay, considering not only was Jay already established as a singles competitor, but every brother versus brother match that had happened at WrestleMania always had the heel win the match. Owen had defeated Brett at WrestleMania 10, Matt defeated Jeff at WrestleMania 25, so continuing that with Jimmy defeating Jay at WrestleMania 40, with another match between the two happening at Backlash, with Jey Uso getting the win there instead of at WrestleMania. Match number 5 would be Bianca Belair versus Charlotte Flair. One of the scenarios we're incorporating here is Charlotte Flair not suffering a knee injury on the December 8th, 2023 episode of SmackDown. The original plans for WrestleMania 40 were to have a singles match between Bianca Belair and Charlotte Flair at the event. WWE once again had separated them for the most part after SummerSlam, where Charlotte had competed for the title at Fastlane while Bianca got a shot the following month at Crown Jewel. They would have likely kicked off this rivalry during the Women's Royal Rumble match, where one eliminates the other, like a lot of WrestleMania match having start that way in the past, like Shawn Michaels versus Kurt Angle for an example. As much as I would like to see Bianca win the match, it's most likely that Charlotte Flair would be the one that wins this, especially having already lost to Rhea Ripley the year prior, that Vince McMahon wouldn't let Charlotte Flair lose 2 years in a row at WrestleMania. Match number 6 would be Cody Rhodes versus Seth Rollins for the World Heavyweight Championship. In case you were wondering, Cody Rhodes doesn't get the match by winning the Royal Rumble in this timeline, but instead would have won the Elimination Chamber match to get that opportunity. This is a match that almost became a reality in the real timeline, but luckily things pivoted into the right direction and had WWE give us what we wanted. Give me what I want! Even though Vince McMahon has been known to also pivot into a different direction than intended, like the Miracle on Bourbon Street with WrestleMania 30, I don't think Vince McMahon would have done that with Cody Rhodes. And even though I'm sure Cody Rhodes would have been the one booked to win this match, especially if Seth Rollins still needs time off for surgery, however, like I mentioned in previous videos, Cody Rhodes winning the World Heavyweight Championship wouldn't have exactly finished the story, considering the title referred to that Dusty Rhodes never won was the WWE Championship itself, or in this case, the undisputed WWE Universal Championship as it was called here. And then we go with match number 7, the main event of this night being Damian Priest versus Cody Rhodes for the World Heavyweight Championship. Damian Priest Money in the Bank cash-in still happens here, but closing out night 1 instead of kicking off night 2 of WrestleMania 40. Even though Damian Priest would have competed in the ladder match earlier in the night and not been exactly 100%, another individual did exactly just that. That being the first person to cash in at WrestleMania, where 9 years prior at WrestleMania 31, Seth Rollins had a match against Randy Orton earlier in the night, with him ending up successfully cashing in the Money in the Bank briefcase and becoming the new WWE World Heavyweight Champion at the end of the night during the main event. Although Cody Rhodes' reign would have been as long as Drew McIntyre's was, now Cody would likely spend the next few months chasing after the World Heavyweight Championship. Shoutout goes to Jackson Weingart, Jada Sanchez, Fox Starkiller, Lola Pines, Hayden Saravo, and Mr. Randomizer. And the reason that they ended up getting a shoutout is because they joined our YouTube channel membership, which only cost $1.99 a month. Not only do you get the shoutout, but you do get lots of other perks, including early access to every single video and shorts that we produce on this channel. So definitely consider joining our YouTube channel membership. It will be greatly appreciated and will go a long way of helping out this channel a lot. So definitely consider it, but let's get right back to the video. And now we are on night 2, with the first match being a new match, Brock Lesnar versus Gunther. Brock Lesnar was rumored to have the long-awaited dream match against Gunther at the event until his name was brought up in the Janelle Grant lawsuit that had WWE cut ties with Brock Lesnar. This timeline will focus on the idea that anything involving the lawsuit doesn't occur, especially because Vince McMahon is still around at this time. Many people thought that the Lesnar-Gunther match was going to be for the Intercontinental Championship, but I don't think that would have been the case, especially knowing that had Vince McMahon not resigned in 2022, that Gunther's Intercontinental Championship reign wouldn't have lasted as long as it did. So like I had stated earlier, Gunther would have dropped the Intercontinental Championship before WrestleMania to feud with Brock Lesnar. Since this is, after all, a Vince McMahon WrestleMania, you know that Brock Lesnar would have been the one walking out with the victory. Match number 2 for this night would be Candice LeRae and Indy Hartwell, Katana Chance and Kaden Carter, the Unholy Union, and Damage Control in a fatal 4-way tag team match for the WWE Women's Tag Team Championship. The year prior at WrestleMania 39, there was the WrestleMania Women's Showcase fatal 4-way tag team match, but this time at WrestleMania 40, we would actually have the Women's Tag Team Championships on the line. The Women's Tag Team division doesn't really have that many options to put as many teams as possible, especially where certain women who were on teams had so happened to be injured and couldn't compete at the event. And it's easy to say that due to Damage Control not losing the titles until Backlash in the real timeline, that they would end up retaining the titles in this match. Match number 3 would be Randy Orton versus Drew McIntyre in an interpromotional match. Drew McIntyre, of course, had ended up facing Seth Rollins in the real timeline for the World Heavyweight Championship after winning the Elimination Chamber match, a position that Drew McIntyre was placed in after WWE capitalized on CM Punk's injury and made it into a storyline between Punk and McIntyre throughout the rest of the year. However, like I had mentioned during the intro, CM Punk would not have signed with WWE in late 2023 had Vince McMahon still been in charge, leaving McIntyre's road to WrestleMania being entirely different. Randy Orton had made his return to WWE after being on the shelf with a back injury for 18 months at Survivor Series 2023, competing as a part of Cody Rhodes' team against the Judgment Day, who had recruited Drew McIntyre to be a part of their team for the match. Seeds potentially could have started during that match, but it likely would have happened during the Elimination Chamber, where both men were a part of in the real timeline also. Instead of Logan Paul costing Randy Orton the match, Drew McIntyre would have been the one to do that to begin the feud. This match would be an interpromotional match, as Drew McIntyre was on Raw and Randy Orton was on SmackDown at the time, creating the old school brand moments on the road to WrestleMania of, let's say, Randy Orton not supposed to be on Raw since he's on SmackDown and vice versa, even though those rules of the brand split have pretty much been dead for years now. When it comes to the result of the match, I do think that Randy Orton would have been the one that comes out victorious. Match number 4 of this night, Jade Cargill versus Nia Jax. If I could describe your reaction right now with one emoji, it's probably this one. Am I right or am I right? The seeds would have definitely been planted when they had the confrontation during the 2024 Women's Royal Rumble match that marked Jade Cargill's WWE debut. It's kind of surprising that Nia Jax wasn't a part of WrestleMania after having challenged Rhea Ripley at Elimination Chamber, but not surprising at the same time. However, with Bianca Belair having faced Charlotte Flair in this timeline and Jade Cargill being a part of the show in some sort of way, we unfortunately would have to put up with this match. If there's anything Vince McMahon has done time and time again for some reason at WrestleMania, that's wanting to recreate Hulk Hogan body slamming Andre the Giant, which would have Jade Cargill versus Nia Jax be the women's version of that moment. A match between these two would have been worse in my opinion than the match we had with Jimmy and Jey Uso, especially with how green Jade Cargill is. The 6-woman tag team match we ended up having was best for her as it covered up any weaknesses she may have had in the ring. Even though I'll give Nia Jax credit that she's much better now than her previous run, both Cargill and Jax would thrive best in matches led by women that are more experienced. Match number 5 would be a 6-pack challenge for the United States Championship, which would have AJ Styles, Bobby Lashley, Kevin Owens, LA Knight, Rey Mysterio, and the champion Logan Paul. In the real timeline, all of these competitors were on WrestleMania 40 in various different matches. AJ Styles faced LA Knight, Bobby Lashley was in the Philadelphia Street Fight, Rey Mysterio teamed with Andrade to face Santos Escobar and Dominic Mysterio, and the United States Championship match was a triple threat match involving Logan Paul, Kevin Owens, and Randy Orton. However, with many new matches being made due to circumstances not occurring, this meant some matches we saw in the real timeline would have to be scrapped. The winner of the match would have probably still been Logan Paul, as much as I would have personally liked to see LA Knight get this as his own WrestleMania moment. Not too long before this is when Vince McMahon decided to call call him up to the main roster and repackage him as Max Dupree. If it wasn't for Triple H being able to take over while McMahon was gone in 2022, we wouldn't have had him become LA Knight again. Match number 6 would be Bayley versus Io Sky for the WWE Women's Championship. Everything about this match stays the same, even with the idea of Bayley winning the Royal Rumble to get the opportunity. I do think the match was going to happen regardless of whether this match had the title on the line or not. Although it is possible that somehow the Bianca Belair Charlotte Flair match does have the WWE Women's Championship involved, I think it's a big enough match to where they didn't need the title involved with it. This match I think deserved to have the title, as this also meant that Io Sky would have a much longer reign than she would have had she dropped it to either Charlotte Flair or Bianca Belair sometime before WrestleMania. And of course, like I mentioned, everything still stays the same, including Bayley walking out as the new champion. And the main event of night 2, of course, is The Rock versus Roman Reigns for the undisputed WWE Universal Championship. The match that almost happened in the real timeline when they almost decided to have Cody Rhodes basically give The Rock the match and go after the other world title. The reason I didn't have Cody Rhodes win the Royal Rumble in this timeline is because I think Vince McMahon would have booked The Rock to win the 2024 Men's Royal Rumble match. If you don't believe me, go back and watch the Royal Rumble 2 years prior where Brock Lesnar was booked to win the match even though he can get a title match without winning the Rumble. The same would go here with The Rock, so they can guarantee this match since they tried doing it the year prior and couldn't. So much would have happened with this match, including the fact that Roman Reigns would have ended up retaining the undisputed WWE Universal Championship, having him very likely hold it past the number of days that Hulk Hogan's first world title lasted, which Reigns would have surpassed it sometime in September 2024. And we could have been looking at a WrestleMania 41 where Roman Reigns would be walking into the event being champion for 1,694 days. Without the pivot they did, this would also mean that we would miss out on The Rock's reinvention of his character by becoming the final boss. And this would also mean that we wouldn't have so much brain rot by saying, it's gonna be bloodline rules, look at you now, Mama Rhodes, had we had Roman Reigns versus The Rock at WrestleMania 40.